You're listening to Boomers Today with your host, Frank Sampson.
Well, welcome to Aging Boomers. That was the name of the show years ago. Can't believe that came out. Welcome to Boomers Today Radio. I really appreciate you joining us today. We have, there's quite a bit of useful information that we bring about on issues facing baby boomers, their parents, and other loved ones. And I just can't thank all of you enough for joining us and for sharing our podcasts and individual shows as well with friends and family. Our listeners are growing each and every day, and it's because of you. We don't do any advertising or anything. I mean, but our listeners are growing every day, and I know it's because of you. So many of you listen to the show on, one of many podcast stations, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spreaker, Stitcher, iHeartRadio. There's a lot of them out there, and we're on them all. So thank you so much for your support. And I do know why we're getting so many listeners, and you're sharing with people, because we have wonderful guests that are experts in the field. And I'm not going to disappoint you today. We have with us Dr. Glenn Osborne, who is the Managing Director of Elder Veterans Legal Aid Group. He is a gerontologist with many years of experience in the senior living industry. And during that time, Dr. Osborne learned most people either did not know about VA benefits or there was no easy way to file for them. Therefore, he decided to create a solution. Today, Glenn will explain VA benefits available to veterans and surviving spouses to help pay for needed care, and how you can be an advocate and resource for not only for your clients, but your family and friends as well. Education is key in helping as many as possible. He will explain the services offered by Elder Veterans Legal Aid Group as well. So, Glenn, I could call you Glenn, right? I know it's Dr. Osborne. All right. Glenn, thank you so much for joining us on Boomers Today. It's funny, when I introduced, the show started out years ago. It was called Aging Boomers, and we changed the name. And I can't believe that just came out from the past when I was introducing the show. Interesting how that happens. But thank you so much.
Yeah. In most of our cases, it's a fairly accurate.
Yeah, I know it, but you know what? I realize that still people, the boomers, they don't like to think of themselves as aging, even though we are.
Yes.
Yeah. But again, thank you so much, and thank you for everything that you do. Maybe you could give we talk about VA benefits. There's a lot of different VA benefits out there. And certainly if you want to touch upon them, that's fine. But I think our emphasis today is going to be VA benefits as it relates to long-term care. So maybe you could define, long-term care and give maybe an overview of VA benefits, and then we'll take it from there.
Sure, Frank. Well, here's the conundrum. This is the big issue. The average cost of an assisted living facility today is right at $5,000 a month. The average income for someone 75 or over, which is the demographic that's usually going to use that and need that level of care, whether it's home or assisted living or memory care, is around $3,800. So the problem is obvious. The cost of care per month far exceeds the ability of a lot of people to have the resources to pay that. So in our case, what we're trying to do, and I'll just give you some background here. I started out in the long-term care business 25 years ago, actually. And one of the things that kind of shocked me right off the bat was that there were benefits that could help absorb some of the cost. And frankly, when I say absorb some of the cost, in many cases, we're talking about 20 to 50% per month of what those costs may be through programs that are administered by the Department of Veterans Affairs. The big problem was nobody knew about them. Or conversely, people who did know about them, well, in my humble opinion, there's more misleading and sometimes incomplete information, sometimes just wrong information about the benefits than there is good usable information. For example, uh, I'll talk to you a little bit about the benefits and what they are and how they operate. But significantly, there's not a benefit administered by the VA that pays for the cost of care. In other words, if you're a veteran or the surviving spouse of a veteran, and you have to go into some form of care, whether it's at home, facility based, whatever it is, there's no VA program that steps up as a stipend and says, okay, because you're a veteran and you have this need, we're going to help fund it. That program does not exist. It has never existed. Mm-hmm. And that's one of the big misunderstandings. What you do have, however, are two programs that the VA administers, excuse me, that can help with that cost. So there are two programs. The difference between the two programs is when the veteran's disability originated. If it originated while the veteran was on active duty, it's called a compensation benefit. If it originated after military service and there is a financial need, it's called a non-service connected pension. Now, a lot of people are very familiar with the term aid and attendance. Mm-hmm. Right. This is another one of those areas where there's a lot of mythology. Aid and attendance is used as a placeholder term for the pension benefit. Aid and attendance does not exist as a standalone benefit. There's not even a process to apply for it. There's not a form for it. All in the world aid and attendance has ever been is if you are pension eligible, for example, or in some cases compensation eligible, and you present the VA with medical evidence that shows that you, because of your medical deficits, you have the need of the assistance of other people to safely execute your normal activities because of disability, the VA will simply give you more money. That additional money, which is termed a special monthly benefit, is aid and attendance. So if you hear someone use the term aid and attendance, 99% of the time, they're talking about the pension benefit. They're just calling it by the wrong name, and it can be very confusing. Mm-hmm. So what I can do, if you would like, I can explain the difference between those two programs with special emphasis on the pension program, because I think that's the one that's going to have the most traction with your listeners.
No, that'd be great. Go for it. Let's do it. And that's what we're trying to do, is to educate our listeners. Many of them are adult children, of course, that are listening, and some are in our industry and need to still understand the benefits, because it can be confusing.
Absolutely. Yeah, we run into that multiple times a day. So the first program that the VA administers is service-connected disability, and it's called compensation. If you served in the military and you had a disability that originated while you're on active duty, it's called a compensation benefit. There are two types of instances where compensation could apply. One is what I think of as a direct cause. In other words, you were wounded, you were in an accident, you had a disease, you were ill, whatever it might be, and that caused a disability. The other area, which is frankly, I can't say that it's the biggest of the two cases right now, but it's certainly the one that's getting the most airtime, if you will. And that is what are called presumptive cases. So, for example, if you were in the Republic of Vietnam or in the coastal waters of Vietnam, you are automatically presumed to have been exposed to the toxic defoliant dioxin, better known as Agent Orange. And there's a whole raft of diseases and pathologies that are associated with exposure to that chemical. Just recently, September of 2022, Congress passed the most sweeping reform of VA disability legislation in over 30 years. It's called the PACT Act, P-A-C-T Act.
Right.
And what it did, the Department of Defense finally came clean, if you will, and said, oh yeah, by the way, we didn't just use Agent Orange in the demilitarized zone in Korea and in the Republic of Vietnam. We also used it in Thailand, we used it in Laos, we used it in Guam, we used it in Johnson Atoll. There was other locations where that chemical was used. And so all of the people whose claims had been denied in the past for Agent Orange exposure now were able to come back in and file a claim. The most significant one, in my opinion, is we staged a lot of our Air Force assets out of Thailand. We were leasing Royal Thai Air Force bases. And before the PACT Act, the VA said, well, it was only used around the perimeters on the security fences. Well, it was used right up to the tarmac. I mean, it was just all over the place. So all of the people that were in the Air Force and were in those air bases and they died of prostate cancer or respiratory cancer or Parkinson's disease or ischemic heart disease or any of those types of things, now the PACT Act allowed people to file those benefits. So you've got direct disabilities, and then you've got presumed disabilities. The key to it is, if you're going to do a successful compensation claim, the biggest issue is you've got to kind of get the idea of fairness out of your mind, because as I tell people all the time, the law is not necessarily fair. You hope it is, but it's not necessarily. And what I mean by that is you've got to be able to prove to the VA on the basis of evidence, objective evidence, that the disability originated when you said it did. There's got to be some medical record, or there's got to be some presumptive record to allow you to do that. A lot of people will look back and say, well, I've got back trouble today, and that's because I was lugging, mortar rounds on my back in Vietnam. And that's fine. That's probably the case, but you've got to be able to link those two. So the compensation benefit is the largest of the programs, and it's the one that is most fraught with difficulties in terms of applying for and receiving the benefit. Frank, I think your listeners would probably be more interested in the second of the programs, which is called the pension.
Right.
Now, the pension program has been around in one form or another since 1866,
Wow.
right at the end of the Civil War. It's gone through several different iterations. The last iteration was January the 1st of 1979, the so-called improved pension. So this is not a new program whatsoever. Now, pension conjures up retirement. That's not the case. The VA uses the term pension completely differently. What the pension program does, and this is significant, this is extremely important to understand. I beg your pardon. The pension guarantees a veteran or the surviving spouse of a veteran who served honorably during a period of time that Congress authorized a certain level of net monthly income. So again, it's not a stipend because daddy served in wartime military, or that mama is the surviving spouse. It's not a stipend. It is a financial income guarantee. The law simply states that the purpose of pension was to provide a minimum degree of financial security for wartime veterans and their families. Now, where this has the biggest application in your world and in our world, and for most of your listeners, is simply the fact, as we pointed out earlier, that the cost of care in many, many cases, matter of fact, I think the majority of cases, far exceeds the income capability of the person needing the care.
Right. Right.
So there's a deficit. They're having to draw from family resources. They're having to draw from their assets, their savings, their estate, whatever it may be. So in those cases, the pension benefit can apply. And in my history and observation, uh, generally speaking, if you're eligible for pension and you're looking at an assisted living situation, for example, VA benefits can essentially absorb 20 to 50% per month of the cost of that care.
Right, which is pretty significant. It could mean the difference between having to stay in a place that's not so good to a place that's pretty good, so
Yeah, and
yeah.
it's all over the quality of life spectrum, because instead of being in a studio, you might be able to afford a one bedroom. You could be on a better level assisted living type facility. I mean, it's all kinds of things. But the significant thing to take away from this is that if you qualify for the VA benefit, and let's say that it covers 30% of the monthly cost, that's like getting a 30% discount on the cost of care in perpetuity. So
Right.
it's not a move-in special. It's not a incentive. It's that money's going to come in as long as you maintain eligibility, and it's going to be there to help cover that cost. So two things are going to happen. One is you're going to be better able to afford the cost. And the second thing is, and we hear this all the time, I think we've got enough money for mama for 3 years, before she runs out of money. Well, if the VA benefit picks up 30% of that cost, now you've gone to 4 to 5 years
Correct.
of
Right.
funds. So
Right.
it gives you that additional level of financial security. So the pension program is what most of your listeners are going to be familiar with. So let me just throw out one caveat, and that is, if you go to a professional or to an assisted living or to a memory care or what have you, and they start talking about aid and attendance, think potato.
Yeah, I was
So
just going to say that. So pension and veterans, what a lot of people refer to as aid and attendance, are synonymous.
that is correct. It's not accurate, but when you hear aid and attendance, 99 times out of 100, in my experience, they're talking about the pension benefit. They're calling it by the wrong name, and it can be confusing, because if you go online and you look up one article about the real aid and attendance benefit, then you look up another article and see somebody calling the pension benefit aid and attendance in error. It's like night and day,
Yeah.
and people walk away scratching their heads. So what I would encourage your listeners to do is to say, oh, no, listen, I listened to Osborne for 25 minutes, and I know that when I hear aid and attendance, it's actually the pension benefit. So I've got it. I understand how that works.
Great. Great. Yeah, go ahead, Dylan.
I was going to say, the cool thing about the pension benefit eligibility, right, is there's only 4 eligibility requirements. And the answers to those 4 requirements fall very neatly into areas that you can think of as either black or white, yes or no type answers.
Yeah.
So it's either a fact or it's not a fact. There's no subjectivity, there's no maybe, there's no gray area, there's no kind of, on a good day, it might be this or the other. No, it's not that at all. It's either a fact or it's not a fact.
So what I'd
So
like to do, Glenn, if we can, we're going to take a real quick break. When we come back, we'll talk about the criteria and maybe hit upon some of the myths that people hear about. So we're just going to recognize our sponsor and come back, and we'll certainly learn more about your organization and some of those other questions I think people are going to want to know the answers to. Okay?
absolutely.
Great. Give your voice a rest here as well. So, yeah. So, do you know anyone who may be concerned about an older driver? Well, Senior Care Authority's Beyond Driving with Dignity program is a facilitated self-assessment program for older drivers. This program has been designed to serve as a vital tool to facilitate older drivers and their families as they make appropriate decisions regarding the future of one's safe driving career. If the individual is a safe driver, an advisor will provide him or her with strategies on how to remain a safe driver as they progress through the aging process. If driving retirement is the appropriate decision, then the individual and their family are offered possible alternatives, resources, and a specific plan to ensure a smooth and successful transition from the driver's seat to the passenger seat. So to learn more, you could go to www.beyonddrivingwithdignity.com or call 877-907-8841 to connect with a senior care authority advisor in your area. So we are back with Glenn Osborne. Glenn is the managing director for Elder Veterans Legal Aid Group. So Glenn, I know I have some additional questions for you where we kind of left off, but maybe before we do that, maybe you could share with our listeners a little bit more about your organization, and it's commercial time for you. Go ahead and tell them.
Sure. Well, Elder Veterans Legal Aid Group is a zero net profit law firm. We're an honest to goodness law firm. The only area that we practice in is veterans disability law with one goal, period. And that is to help families understand the availability and the eligibility requirements for benefits so that they can take advantage of those benefits to help fund the cost of care of a loved one. That's all we do. We don't do elder law. We don't do Medicaid planning. We don't do estate planning. We don't mess with people's money. We think, at least from our viewpoint, that's a conflict of interest. So we don't do any of that. So we're very, very straightforward and limited on what we do. We have one goal, and that is to help people get into a safe environment to live and try to make the experience of learning about the veterans benefits and the eligibility issues as simple and painless as it possibly can be done in order to take care of a loved one. That's all we do. We have clients in all 50 states. We're, I think, internationally now, from New Zealand to Switzerland, actually. So, and we've been doing this for over 20 years. So we've helped a lot of people, and significantly, as opposed, and you're about to hear one of my hot buttons, as opposed to other people that operate in this space, we do not make a profit. It was never intended to make a profit. We don't think it's right to profit over the service of people who serve their country. Unfortunately, we have to keep the lights on, and we've got a staff of paralegals that think they ought to be paid every Friday. I haven't been able to talk them out of that over the years. So we have to cover our expenses, but that's all we do. We do not make a profit doing what we do. We just keep our doors open.
Gotcha.
So that's who we are and what we do, and we generally operate on the basis of referrals. We've developed I think, a very good reputation across the country over the years, and people are sent to us because primarily they know that whatever we tell them is going to be factual. It's going to be right out of the law. It's not going to be something we read on the internet last night or what somebody told us in a meeting. It's right out of the law, and they can count on the veracity and the truthfulness of the information we give.
Gotcha. Great information. And your website is?
It is www.evlag. That's Echo Victor Lima Alpha Golf.com.
Great. Perfect. So, just kind of where we left off before, I mean, people that are listening to this and never knew of some of these benefits, or maybe didn't know about the pension benefit, they might be going, wow, this could be significant to them. So before they get too excited, about it, why don't you go over the particular criteria at a minimum, because just because someone was a veteran doesn't mean they're going to be able to get a pension benefit. So maybe you could go over some of those more specific criteria. So again, I don't want to burst people's bubble, but they need to understand the facts.
Sure, absolutely. Well, like we were talking about before the break, there's only 4 criteria, and the answers to the criteria fall into categories that are, it's either a fact or it's not a fact. There's no subjectivity to it. So the first thing that we've got to prove is that the veteran served during a period of time that Congress authorized. Now, those are extended war periods. And what I mean by extended, World War II is not over until December 31st of 1946. Korea is not over until January 31st of 1955, et cetera, et cetera. You have to have served at least 90 days of active federal duty, and one of those 90 days has to have been during the window of time that Congress authorized. The proof of that service is your discharge paper. If you don't have a discharge paper, if you can't locate it, we are very good detectives, and we will go to the National Personnel Records Center, which is a division of the National Archives in St. Louis, and we will order a copy of it for you, or we will try to help you find it from another source. There are many other sources that we can draw on. But your discharge paper is, if you will use this as an analogy, it's the golden ticket. Shows the date you went in, the date you got out, and the character of discharge. So that's number one. You have to have served honorably during the window of time that Congress authorized. Right now, you've got World War II, Korea, Vietnam, and then the global war on terror, which began on August the 2nd of 1990, and significantly has not been terminated. So it's still active. So those are the dates of roughly of service. So that's number one. Number two is, if you're married, the VA will pay you at a slightly higher rate. If you are the surviving spouse of a veteran, we have to prove that you and the veteran were married at the time the veteran passed away, and that you didn't remarry afterwards. The definition of surviving spouse is married at time of death, no other marriages. So the way you do that is with the death certificate of the veteran, not to show the veteran passed away, but to show that you were married at the time that the veteran passed away. And the VA will also vet that with Social Security. They're online with Social Security, so they'll vet that there haven't been any other marriages. So that's the first two criteria, is military and marriage. All right, now the third thing is, if we want to try to add the aid and attendance special benefit, then we're going to need to acquire medical information from your physician. It's a 4-page form that lists what the diagnoses are, how those diagnoses create disabilities, and how those disabilities affect a person's ability to function safely on a daily basis in areas such as bathing, dressing, grooming, toileting, ambulation, medication management, so on and so forth. It doesn't require exams, it doesn't require labs, but those 4 pages are very important, and they have to be filled out accurately and thoroughly. So with that information in mind, that will allow the VA, and they call it rating. They will rate a person in need of the special aid and attendance benefit. So you've got military, marriage, and medical, and the medical is the aid and attendance special benefit. Now, significantly enough, there are cases where aid and attendance does not factor into the pension. So you have pension generally made up of 2 issues. You have basic pension, and then you have the pension at the special aid and attendance rate. For example, if you are a married veteran and you are not eligible for aid and attendance, then the guaranteed net monthly income for you is $1,806. If you are going to take the aid and attendance special benefit and you're eligible for it, that goes up to $2,727. So you can apply for the basic pension, or you can have the pension at the aid and attendance rate. So where that falls in primarily, we see it quite a bit. You've got a married veteran. Daddy is still playing golf 3 times a week. Mama has a cognitive impairment or deficit, and she's in memory care. Well, the veteran can't apply for aid and attendance because the veteran doesn't need aid and attendance. It's mama that needs the aid in attendance, but you can't award aid in attendance for her if the veteran is still alive. So we can apply for the basic pension, and that would still be a significant financial benefit. All right, so military, marriage, medical. The last one is financial, and here's why it's financial. This benefit guarantees a net monthly income. If you guys listening to this, if you've seen online or wherever a list of the amount of monthly benefit that a person could get, that's not a stipend. That is the amount of net monthly income that is guaranteed. So pension is a needs-based benefit. The law says you have to prove, quote, limited net worth. That's a combination of your net income and your net assets. Here's how income works. VA is going to add up your total gross household income from all sources: Social Security, pensions, retirement, interest, dividends, disbursements from 401ks, IRAs, annuities, you name it. Any money comes in once a year, divided by 12, comes in quarterly, divided by 3, get it down to a monthly number. From that, you are allowed to subtract certain medical expenses on the initial claim that the VA considers to be predictable. So, for example, you cannot subtract the cost of prescriptions or over-the-counter preparations or doctor's copays or hospital copays, because VA says those are not predictable enough. What can you deduct? The cost of your room, board, and care at assisted living or memory care, and in most cases, the room and board at independent living facilities. Those are straight dollar for dollar deductions. So, for example, if you're spending more per month to be in care, either at home or in a facility, than you make, the VA's position on that is your net income for VA purposes is zero. You're spending all you got on care, which is a deductible medical expense. So because your net countable income then in that particular case or example becomes zero, then you are allowed and granted the full maximum pension benefit per month.
Gotcha.
So if you're a married veteran in need of aid and attendance, you're guaranteed an income of $2,727. So you spend all your normal income, you're at zero net income after the subtractions. The VA comes back and says, okay, you're guaranteed $2,727. That's the rationale for why you qualify for that benefit.
Got it.
So that's income. Asset is very, very simple. Frank, the VA used to be all over the board on how much you could have in terms of assets and still meet the definition of limited net worth. In 2018, they finally got smart, drove a peg in the ground, created an arbitrary number they call the bright line. Currently, the bright line is $155,356. So if you look at your asset, now your home and up to 2 acres of property is an exempt asset. Automobiles are exempt asset. Personal furnishings are exempt assets. But all your financial accounts, your bank accounts, etc., those have to be counted. So once you add those up, it's just an arbitrary cutoff. If you're above 155,000, you don't qualify because you don't meet the limited net worth definition. If you're below 155,000, you're perfectly okay. So it's just a matter of, again, black or white. You're either above the bright line or you're below the bright line. Now, one thing to take away at this point very briefly is you're going to hear a lot of people say that there are ways to reduce the countable asset in order to meet the eligibility requirement. There's only one way you can do that. Everything over 155,000 is called a covered asset. That's the term for it. The only way you can legitimately reduce a covered asset is you can spend it down on goods or services at fair market value. You can't gift it. You can't transfer it. You can't put it in an annuity. And God forbid, folks, you cannot put it in any kind of a trust. Now, you're going to have a lot of people tell you that you can put it in an irrevocable trust. Trust me on this, you cannot legally do that. You will have financial planners that tell you that because there is a 3-year look back on transfers, you can go ahead and transfer money into a trust today, wait 3 years, and then after 3 years, you can use that money. Nope, sorry, doesn't work that way. If it's in a trust, it's in a trust. And if money in a trust can be reasonably expected to be used for the claimant's care and support, it's an asset. It has to be counted. So just to recap briefly, you've got the military service aspect, the marriage, the medical, and the financial. Those are the 4 criteria. And again, they're just black and white.
Great. Glenn, unfortunately, we're out of time. I could, one thing for sure, this can be confusing. I mean, you do it as part, it's your livelihood, right? You have an organization that does this. So I'm going to recommend to everybody, contact Glenn's operation directly. You could go to their website at evlag.com. That's Elder Veterans Legal Aid Group. So Glenn, thank you so much for joining us on Boomers Today. Appreciate it very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Please be safe. Talk to everybody soon.
You've been listening to Boomers Today with Frank Sampson. To learn more about today's show, visit boomerstodayradio.com and join us next time for another edition of Boomers Today.